Hi, it's Kirby Summers, and I welcome you to my true crime podcast. It's the holiday season. I know everyone is busy. I want to thank those of you who take the time to like the video and subscribe. If you haven't done so, please take a second to just give this a like, subscribe. As you know, I have always been peeling off the layers of the Jeffrey Epstein case, which seem to form an ongoing line and intersect with many other, I'm going to call them crimes versus the word conspiracy. Um, Among those, the one that took the life of Danny Casolaro, and which will shed light on how Robert Maxwell, who you all know is Ghislaine Maxwell's father, who himself met an untimely death on November the 5th, 1992, falling off his yacht, the Lady Ghislaine. The Karen Silkwood case, if those of you who are not familiar, take a listen to this entire podcast. I never really, I'd known about it, but I did not realize until like I said, I kept peeling off layers, looking for other cases that had similar um, shadowy world intrigue and people who had been murdered and were involved in possibly a cover-up involving the intelligence agencies. And so, I revisited Karen Silkwood, her life, her death, and who was responsible. So, for those of you who are unaware, Karen Silkwood was born in Longview, Texas. She had two sisters, Linda and Rosemary. She attended Lamar University in Texas, and at the age of 19 in 1965, she married William Meadows. He is the father of her three children. And then, Meadows had a really bad habit. He overspent and he had an affair and he did not want to end the affair. And so, Karen left him in 1972. She relocated to Oklahoma City. And then in 1972, she was hired as a laboratory analyst for the Kerr-McGee Cimarron, uh, sort of like a private nuclear plant, okay? And it's close to Crescent, Oklahoma. She became concerned about several health violations at the corporation. She became involved in the company's union. She was the first woman to have this sort of very proactive, very concerned position, to the point where in the summer of 1974, she testified before the Atomic Energy Commission about the many things that she thought were wrong, health violations, so on and so forth. She In like several months later, on November the 13th, she was scheduled to meet with a New York Times reporter named David Burnham. He had been contacted by a man named Steve Wodka, that's Wodka, who was an Oil, Chemical, and Atomic Workers International Union, so OCAW staffer, and her boyfriend, Drew Stevens. The two men had been talking about what Karen had found at the nuclear plant. And remember, this is a private nuclear facility. And Watka had persuaded Karen to work undercover and gather company files to substantiate her allegations. And, he was planning on writing a story. Well, to be honest, he didn't want to write the story. He had been contacted and he basically said no, but the editor, to to my surprise and to their benefit, said, no, you have to go. So he flew in to Oklahoma and, rented a dive room at a Holiday Inn. And, they were waiting. The three men met on November the 13th. They were waiting for Karen to show up in the evening after work and after she attended another meeting with the union. She had collected some files. They were in her car. So the thing is that 5 minutes into her drive, her car basically, well, what happened was that somebody hit her car, okay? And it made her swerve off the road and she died. The folder of the evidence was never found. There are a lot of nooks and crannies about this case. Her body kind of disappeared for a period of 24 hours, during which time all of her organs were removed. This was discovered only later when there was a trial. Her parents, specifically, I think her father, and on behalf of her three children and the family, initiated a lawsuit, and many things were discovered afterwards. Among them, that the folder containing the documentation that she had collected was not in the car, that her body had disappeared, the car had disappeared. There's just a lot of stuff here that's, very peculiar. And again, this was not really discovered until the attorneys were hired and a trial was about to begin. When she didn't arrive at the hotel, Watka called the president of the union at Kerr-McGee and was told that she had died in the car crash. The three men then immediately drove to the site. The site was basically 3 hours away. So Karen, after work and everything, she was determined to go and drive to 3 hours to drop off the documents and sit down and talk with the New York Times reporter. She had already spent a good deal of time speaking to Watka over the phone, and he was able to record her conversation as she read off some of the documentation that she had already obtained, so that, again, during the trial, Watka was able to substantiate the fact that indeed she did have those documents and some of the information that was contained in those documents. And again, the documents disappeared. The people at Kerr-McGee basically said, oh, we don't know where they are. They in fact insisted, well, let me just keep telling you what happened to her. So anyway, they drive to the site. Her car and her body are gone. The only things they find are her bloody paycheck. And by the way, she made $4 an hour. Okay, $4 an hour. And a paperback book. So, I looked at all the legal filings and discovered some stuff that happened just before her death. So during a 3-day period in November of 1974, Karen was contaminated by plutonium from the Cimarron plant. On November the 5th, she was grinding and polishing plutonium samples. She was utilizing glove boxes designed for that purpose. In accordance with established procedures, she checked her hands for contamination. And then, it was discovered that she was still contaminated. So the device that monitored her contamination levels revealed that her left hand, her right wrist, her upper arm, her neck, her hair, and her nostrils were contaminated. So she was immediately decontaminated. And at the end of the shift, the monitors indicated that she had no contamination. However, she was given urine and fecal kits and was instructed to collect samples in order to continue to check for this plutonium. The next day, Karen arrived at the plant and began doing paperwork in the lab. Paperwork. She wasn't touching anything else. She was just doing paperwork. When she was leaving the laboratory, once again, she monitored herself and again discovered the surface contamination. Once again, she was decontaminated. On the third day, November the 7th, Karen was monitored upon her arrival. Upon her arrival, not departure, arrival, and high levels of contamination were detected. 4 urine samples and 1 fecal sample submitted that morning were highly contaminated. So, suspecting that the contamination had spread to areas outside the plant, the company directed a decontamination squad to accompany Karen to her apartment. Karen lived with a woman by the name of Sherry Lou Dusty, that was her nickname, Ellis, who was also an employee at the plant, and with her boyfriend. They woke up Karen, they checked her. She was also contaminated, but to a lesser degree than Karen. And then the squad monitored the apartment. They found contamination in several rooms, with especially high levels in the bathroom, the kitchen, and Karen's bedroom. And then the contamination level in Karen's apartment was so high that many of her personal belongings had to be destroyed. She herself was sent to the Los Alamos scientific lab to determine the extent of contamination in her vital organs. Okay, she returned to work a week later on November the 13th. But remember, this is the same day that she dies, 5 minutes into her drive to meet the New York Times reporter. Her car, as I said earlier, was run off the road. Bill Silkwood, who was her father, brought a lawsuit against Kerr McGee and hired Daniel Sheeran and Jerry Spence to be attorneys to represent the family. When the case was presented to the court, the judge found himself to be in a odd position because clearly by this point, not only the judge, who, as you know, is told stuff by, let's call it the CIA, the NSA, and all of these agencies, but also the Kerr McGee attorneys would have some knowledge about what was going on and who was involved and what the Kerr McGee plant really was. The judge did not want the information about the Mossad, MI6, or any smuggling of nuclear level stuff being siphoned off and given to foreign governments by the CIA and again the NSA, and for the United States to be caught in a covert operation. And so they decided that they were not going to allow one part of the case to continue. And if you want to get into the actual legalities of this, Daniel Sheehan, there are a couple of interesting classes that he taught. Some of these were recorded. He talks about the case, which is really interesting. And if you're interested in, again, diving into the specifics of the case, just pull up his classes and take a listen to that. So basically, he did state, and this was not basically revealed in the court, but he states that internal documents from Kerr McGee showed management was stealing 98% bomb-grade plutonium, which was being smuggled to Israel by the CIA with the help of Mossad, right? They were sort of like meeting off the Pacific, transferring the plutonium from one ship to Mossad's vessel. It was very, very cloak and dagger. A lot of people lost their lives, like not just during the trial, but people who had become sort of like bumped into this along the way. A news crew basically was looking for something that had nothing to do with Karen Silkwood, and they were murdered because they had bumped into this. I believe, based on what I see here, the connection with Israel and the nuclear material, and the fact that in reality, Kerr-McGee was a cover for being able to do this. It was just a cover. It was like, a CIA cutout, if you will, in order to give nuclear uh, nuclear stuff to Israel, to Iran, to Africa, and to other countries. So that this is what he found during the pre-trial investigation. And of course, as he got closer and closer to fighting in court. So again, I'm going to just list the Kerr-McGee plant was a privately owned nuclear plant. It was a cover, a cutout for producing and smuggling bomb-grade plutonium, not only to Israel, but also to the Shah of Iran, to Africa, and to Brazil. This is very similar to the kinds of information that Danny Casolaro, many years later in 1991, discovered. This is part of Danny's octopus, if you will. And it explains very easily, once you start looking at all these dots and how they interconnect, how Robert Maxwell was able to walk into Sandia Laboratories, sell them a compromised version of the PROMIS software, which allowed Israel to then steal the nuclear secrets of the United States. At the time that Robert Maxwell had gone into Sandia Laboratories, two of the scientists were very concerned. I have done podcast after podcast after podcast describing this. It's also in my books. It's in, I believe, Predator Spy, Jeffrey Epstein, Predator Spy. It's in my Ghislaine Maxwell book, Ghislaine Maxwell, an unauthorized biography. And, I think by now, those of you who have been following the Epstein case are very familiar with the fact that, yes, the United States looked the other way. So these two scientists were concerned. They contacted the FBI, and the FBI did nothing. It's very clear to see that what we've never seen before, because this entire case, the Karen Silkwood case, gives us a better picture of how the CIA, the NSA, the FBI, local agencies work together to cover for each other. And, I'm going to keep sharing other names with you, that some of which you'll be familiar with, but it shows how they work covert programs that are not meant for you or I to ever discover, much less somebody like Danny Casolaro, who did discover a lot of this, and or Karen Silkwood, who initially she believed she was just seeing irregularities, but in reality, she had stumbled upon this massive covert operation taking place in Oklahoma. So what happened at the trial was basically Karen, her estate was awarded a $10 million judgment. It took many, many years because clearly Kerr-McGee argued the judgment and the award and this and that, and ultimately it was settled in 1986, an out-of-court settlement to pay the Silkwood estate $1.38 million, which was less than 1 year's interest on the sum that was originally awarded to her. So that, again, during this very lengthy investigation and very intense fight with the Kerr-McGee people, it was revealed that the parties involved stretched from the local Oklahoma City Police and Oklahoma Highway Patrol to the FBI, the CIA, the National Security Agency, as well as to a handful of front groups and private agencies like Pinkerton, Wackenhut, and even to Savak. And so that, and then of course, Britain's MI5, so that she had been followed, her phones were bugged, and she was run off the road because clearly the Kerr-McGee high officials knew that she was going to be delivering documents to the New York Times, who also, they were unaware that this was a covert intelligence operation about supplying other countries, with nuclear stuff that belonged to the United States, again, in a covert action that was never revealed to the public, that remains top secret classified, okay? And only it's if you find it written anywhere, it's like it's alleged that blah blah blah. So there's always that disclaimer, because again, it could not have been disclosed in the court, and the judge basically did some maneuverings so that this part of the case would not be revealed on that level, because then those documents do become accessible to researchers like you and I, for those of you who researched. So, as I said, her body disappeared for 24 hours. They completely removed all of her organs. The body was then given back to the coroner's office. It reminded me this thing of her body disappearing and being then given back to the coroner's office, to how Danny Casolero's body was handled before even the family was notified of his death. So there are a lot of parallels between Karen Silkwood and Danny Casolero, and I don't think anyone has made this connection. And to talk about the fact that I believe they both stumbled upon the same information. Danny perhaps had a clearer understanding of what he had found, versus Karen, who basically just stumbled upon this as a good Samaritan, somebody who wanted to, the plant to operate in a safe manner. And, quite frankly, what it was discovered, what her attorneys discovered, is that Kerr-McGee had sent their, yeah, they had, if you remember what Harvey Weinstein did with Black Cube, and how our wonderful David Boies hired Black Cube to harass and intimidate Rose McGowan and anyone who claimed that he had done something horrible to them, including Ronan Farrow. They have at their disposal these companies like I named, and even though the house where Karen lived, she lived there with her roommate and her boyfriend, the hired assassins, I'm going to call them assassins, managed to have access into her house, where they put this plutonium into her sandwiches. So she was eating plutonium. So basically what they wanted to do was to make her ill, so that she would just stop complaining, stop her activities on behalf of, just to disappear. And, never mind that she was going to die. So basically her death was already predetermined, right? Even though the people who ultimately caused her to veer off the road, who slammed into her car intentionally because they were going to go after the documents. And later, even the attorneys stated, oh, well, they didn't mean to kill her. Well, I think it's a little too late. You slam into her car, her body's already destroyed with all of this poison. Her house is destroyed with all this poison. Her roommate has poison in her. Her boyfriend has poison in her. So, it's clear that there was intent to kill her. But again, this kind of information could not come out in a court of law. Well, there was a movie, if you remember, about Karen Silkwood's life. Never believe a movie. I watched the film. The film came out in 1983. It starred Meryl Streep, Kurt Russell, and Cher. And, when I first saw it, this was pre my thinking or knowing about so many of the really dark things that we, the public, are not privy to, because clearly we're not going to get this from watching our news, reading our newspapers, or, even really going through a lot of these court cases, because a lot of this stuff is just too dark. It's not told to us. We're lied to on a daily basis. So the film, I didn't, I thought, oh, okay, this happened, and so that the blame stayed with the plant. And it was just completely, the whole thing was watered down, even though she dies in the end, because clearly it's based on a true life. And the role of Karen was played by Meryl Streep, and she dies in the film, but it was by far, like, most people remember that, and they don't see the whole picture about what really happened in that case, the real implications of that case. And that's a good example of why Hollywood is such a good tool for the CIA, and why there is this, to present day, a collaborative effort between Hollywood and the intelligence agencies and our respective governments, right? To sort of present something to the public, to brainwash you into believing the watered down version, as opposed to you finding out what the truth was. Because if you found out what the truth was, clearly the citizens are going to be completely upset. And, we would see uprising in the streets, and that's what would happen. So, like, her boyfriend in 1995, he dies in a very bizarre plane crash. He was he knew how to fly a plane, and he was even, like, into all kinds of contests and all kinds of things, but very weird plane crash. He dies in 1995. Her roommate, Dusty, was arrested several times for very bizarre incidents. Remember, what they want to do is they want to damage, defame your reputation so that you come off as being a liar. She had begun to tell people that she knew who killed Karen, and that she had written a tell-all book. Here's the thing, she may have written the book, but it was never published. All right. And then she too died of cancer in 2012. In 1975, 1 year after Karen's murder, Kerr-McGee shuttered its Cimarron nuclear plant. And from that time to present day, there are no more privately owned nuclear plants. And what I discovered while researching this case is that there are lots of fake free websites with all kinds of fake information, which only shows how much effort went into, and this is like so many years later, which only shows the amount of effort undertaken by the intelligence community, right, to push the story down away from our view. And that happens to present day. We saw it happen in the Epstein case. I just read a very watered down article in the Wall Street Journal, which, basically paints Epstein as a lone predator, blah, blah, blah. They may name other people like Bill Gates and Woody Allen and all of that, but they don't really tell us exactly what's going on with that, or how it connects to, let's say, something like this. And, nuclear issues and what happens, what the real purpose of a trafficking blackmail operation is for the United States and its allies. And we can see here that Israel, and at the time Iran, when it was under basically when the United States was in charge with the Shah of Iran, how the US just helped them covertly, without, again, without the knowledge of the people, even if it meant killing a lot of innocent observers during the course of this. Before I sign off, I want to say that during the trial, 5 people were murdered. Many others had been murdered previous to that, and to present day, there are murders of anyone who finds this kind of information. Whistleblowers are not looked kindly upon, especially whistleblowers who discover the kinds of things, let's say, that Robert Maxwell was involved in. That it's just like it all interconnects. Even the attorney Sheehan understands how this interconnects to other things like the Iran-Contra affair and all of that. So in any event, I know that this was a dark subject and I didn't want to bring you down, but I think that awareness is something that we just need. We need to know what's really happening in the world. We need to know how to spot the patterns, and by spotting the patterns, we can then put together the real narrative versus the fake narrative that we're presented with on a daily basis. In any event, once again, I wish you all are having a happy holiday time. And please, if you haven't subscribed, take a moment to do so now, and be kind enough, again, to give this a like. All right, guys, have a good day. Bye.